On today's episode, I'm joined by Mike Folta from the Rockford IceHogs broadcast booth. We'll be discussing the IceHogs' first half of the AHL regular season and get into some updates on Ethan Del Mastro, Nolan Allen, and Drew Commesso. All that and plenty more right here on Locked On Blackhawks.
You're Locked On Blackhawks, your daily podcast on the Chicago Blackhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome on into another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, thank you all for making the show your very first listen here to start off your day. And a quick reminder to all you viewers out there to please go and smash the like button, comment down below, and subscribe to the Locked On Blackhawks YouTube channel if you haven't done so already. And also to all my audio listeners out there, please make sure to go and rate and review. It only takes 2 seconds and really does help me out tremendously. So please make sure to take care of that real quick. And also got to let you know, today's episode is brought to you by Sleeper, the go-to platform for daily fantasy sports. And right now, if you use the promo code LOCKEDONNHL in all caps, you'll get up to an $100 match on your first deposit with Sleeper. All right, everyone, joining me today, as I'm sure you noticed by the title of today's episode, the thumbnail, and my introduction, is none other than Mike Folta from the Rockford IceHogs broadcast booth. I had Mike on earlier during training camp prior to the start of the Blackhawks and the IceHogs seasons, but now that we are past the midway point of the NHL regular season and getting close to that point in the AHL regular season as well, I thought it would be a nice time to have Mike back on the show. So Mike, thank you very much. I know you're a busy man, so thank you for taking the time. How's the first half of the regular season treating you? How you been? You staying warm out there in Rockford, by the way?
Yeah. You know, we were coming back from. Well, first, thanks for having me back, Jack. But we were coming back from Grand Rapids the other day, and it was a little sketchy. Our bus driver Dave did an awesome job getting us back home safe and sound. But after these Saturday games, when we're on the road, a lot of times we're driving back that night, right? And there was snow coming down in Michigan, as there was all across the Midwest, and we were probably going 30 miles an hour on the highway, and I don't know how Dave could see anything in front of us. It was crazy, but it took us about 2 hours longer than it usually did, and I was fine with that because we made it home safe and sound. But there was one point where we took an exit and we didn't even realize that we had, because the visibility was so bad, and we come up to a stop sign and kind of realized, like, wait a minute, we're not on the highway here anymore. But that was kind of what it was like the other weekend. But again, our busy did a great job, and yeah, it's been fun to have this hockey weather coming on. It feels like we're in the swing of things now, and the Hogs are back above 500 as we record this here on in the middle of January, back above 500 for the first time since early December. So it was a rough December at times for Rockford, but the boys have kind of since pulled themselves out of it.
Hey, a pretty rough December for the Chicago Blackhawks as well. I guess it's kind of going around for the organization, but quick shout out to Dave for making sure everyone got home safe. Glad that was the case so you could be able to come on the show. But as you just mentioned, Mike, the Rockford IceHogs above 500 there. Now 15, 14, 3-1 through their first 33 games, getting close to that midway point of the year, like I said. But they've won 5 of their last 8, just had a really good weekend beating Grand Rapids. Am I correct in both of those games? Just curious, what's kind of been working well for the IceHogs here as of late? And now that we got a pretty good sample size here in the first half, what are kind of some things that have stood out to you as a whole about this team?
Well, we knew it was going to be a young team coming in, right? I mean, you still have some kind of veteran pieces coming back, like, you know, with David Gust, who was the leading scorer last year, Brett Seney, second leading scorer. Those two guys have kind of returned to that level of play, at least from an offensive production standpoint. We knew that the D was going to be really young here in Rockford, with a couple of prospects, and Ethan Del Mastro and Nolan Allen being the kind of the two big ones that I think people are looking at closely. But there's been several other young guys as well that have stepped up here in Rockford. And what's been interesting is that has been the maturation of some of these young prospects here with the IceHogs. And we've seen guys like Del Mastro and like Allen step in from their first professional game back on October 13th in San Jose and been dynamite, steadfast defensemen since that game, basically, and been reliable. Both of those guys have been able to play in pretty much every situation here in Rockford. And also guys like Drew Commesso in goal coming in and having a really hot start to the year and to his professional career. And then another rookie, Colton Dach, former second rounder of the Blackhawks, who has come in and produced around a point per game here with Rockford during the start of his professional career. So we've seen a lot of these young guys come in and produce alongside this veteran leadership. And I think the biggest change, you mentioned the rough December, and it was a rough December. The Hogs lost 7 in a row at one point, and like you said, have been a lot better as of late, and the team has picked up points in 8 of its last 11 games now. But I think one of the big points is how Rockford is responding to adversity in games. That's been one of the big changes as of late, whereas maybe earlier in the year when this team would get behind, I don't think there was ever a drop-off in effort, but the team maybe struggled to find that next gear, right? And to find a way to get a goal when you're down 2-0 or when you're down 2-1 to tie the game. And the Hogs have been able to do that as of late. Right before the new year, we scored 3 goals from 3 rookies in the third period to come back and tie a game against Milwaukee and to earn that point in a shootout loss. A little bit before that, we scored 2 goals, down 3-1 in the third period. We scored 2 goals, one of them from a rookie to come back and tie that game. And so, we've shown this throughout the last couple of weeks that this team has gotten better at kind of handling some of the ebbs and flows of the game and being able to come back when behind. And hey, it's been 2 really successful weekends here this last month, or the start of January, I should say. You go into Texas and you split with the best team in the Central Division, the Texas Stars, who have the top 2 scorers in the league, and you keep those guys somewhat in check. And then you go into Grand Rapids, a team that was very hot entering that week. They'd won 5 in a row entering that week, and you sweep them in GR, and one of those being a shutout. And so this team has certainly turned a corner here in January, and then there's a long way to go, but it's been exciting to see the maturation of this young group.
And I'm curious, how much of that do you credit to the veterans that the IceHogs do have? And the reason I bring this up is because it feels like, I'm not going to compare David Gust or Brett Sini to Nick Foligno, or, they're not quite the same age, but they're kind of the veterans, it feels like, for this Rockford IceHogs group. And you mentioned some young players like Ethan Del Mastro, Colton Dach there. How much credit do you give to some of the veteran guys in the locker room and on the ice for kind of turning it around after a tough December like you spoke about?
Well, I think you also got to remember too, Anders Bjork's part of that group as well. Right. He's on an AHL contract, even though he's been in the NHL more than the AHL throughout his career. But he's been really good this year, stepping in as a top line center, even though he's primarily played the wing. He's kind of proved his versatility this year at the pivot role. And Mike Hardman is not a guy you'd say he's a vet. He's 24 years old, but he's been in professional hockey, been with the organization now 3 years, and so he's seen a bit here in his time with Rockford and Chicago. But yeah, those guys deserve all the credit in the world. First of all, for what they've done in the room, but you could just go through the stats of the IceHogs, and a lot of those leading scorers are those more senior guys. Colton Dach's up there as well, being a rookie, but he's been banged up throughout the season. But yeah, those older guys have been lugging the mail offensively, and you saw that when Bjork was banged up, he took a puck to the face in practice and missed a bunch of games. Gust had a wrist injury. When those guys were banged up, like, this IceHogs team struggled to score, and getting them all back in the lineup. Hardman was out for 6 games. Like, getting them all back in the lineup has made a huge difference. And Rockford's been scoring more goals as of late, and we've been winning games.
Well, it's nice to hear that there is that leadership structure down in Rockford, as there is in Chicago too, to help guide the youngsters through a lot of their first or second full professional seasons. And nice that they're getting back on the ice, being healthy. That certainly helps things too, as the Blackhawks and the IceHogs have been quite banged up here early on in the season. Mike, I got to definitely ask you about a couple of different players, but I think first we got to start with Ethan Del Mastro at 20 years. Is he 20 yet, or is he still 19?
He just turned 21. We're recording on the 17th. I think he turned 21. Was it yesterday or the day before? Or no, it was the 15th. He turned 21, I believe. He's 21.
Apologies, Ethan. I apologize for missing that. But regardless, Ethan Del Mastro, whether it's 20 or 21, is playing phenomenal hockey in his first full professional season down in Rockford. The offensive numbers look really sharp. What has kind of stood out to you about Ethan's game? And I also wanted to ask, I saw you posted on social media the other day that he's getting a lot of opportunities to play on the Blackhawks power play or the Blackhawks, excuse me, the IceHogs power play. I'm so used to saying that on my own show. And that was something we saw with Alex Vlasic last year, right? And that might not be what they're meant to do long-term with Kevin Korchinski and Sam Rinzel in the organization as well. But getting them those opportunities to be more confident with their puck handling, how do you think that's helped Ethan Del Mastro in his offensive game so far this year as well?
Yeah, I mean, he has all the confidence in the world on the ice, or at least from what it looks like up top. And he kind of had that from night one. I remember kind of going into that first series in San Jose back in October. And, as a broadcaster, you're there in practice, right? And you kind of see how they're lining up, but you don't know exactly who's going to be on PP1 on the first game. And there he was, in the first game running that top power play unit. And this was a power play unit, by the way, with the IceHogs that was the best in the league through the first, I would say, month or so of the season. I mean, like just astronomical numbers that obviously, things kind of even out throughout the course of the season. But this is a power play that was operating at like 35% through the first, couple of weeks of the season. Not necessarily sustainable numbers for most groups, but Del Mastro was a part of that. He's confident with the puck, and he might not dazzle you with like just his shiftiness, but remember he's 6'4" out there, so yeah. He's quick. Yeah, he's decisive with the puck. He skates really well, but he's also been hard to play against, and they put him and Nolan Allen out there in pretty much every situation, whether it's a situation in which Rockford needs a goal or a situation in which Rockford is trying to protect the house and protect the lead. So he's been entrusted with a lot of responsibility this year as just a young guy.
Well, it's awesome to see that he's been making the most of those opportunities and will be playing in the AHL All-Star Game representing the IceHogs. Is he still playing frequently with Nolan Allen?
Yes, there was a time they were paired up together for, I would say, the first month and a half of the season. Then there were a lot of injuries and call-ups, and so that decor looked a lot different in the middle of November than it did in October. So they did get split up, honestly, to split up, two of the better defensemen that Rockford has to try and distribute some of that ability throughout the pairings. But I believe the last couple of games they've been linked up together, I want to say. I believe they were this last weekend, and they're a lot of fun to watch together too. Obviously, they're roommates, right? So yep. They're always around each other, and you can tell they're roommates. By the way, like when they're in the room or whatever, they're always hanging out, and they're good buddies. And it's fun to watch them, and they both have a really good offensive game. Like Nolan Allen is not maybe going to be known as an offensive defenseman, but he's another guy that moves the puck really quickly. He's got great hands. He's very deliberate with the puck. And as a broadcaster, I don't call his name as much. And as a broadcaster, like you can't watch the game the same way a fan does. Like I have to watch the puck when I'm calling the game pretty much exclusively. And Nolan Allen, if you're watching as a fan, one thing you'll notice is just how disruptive he is. If you're watching number 42 for Rockford, he is an eraser on defense. Kind of reminds me of a Nick Hjalmarsson type guy, like not the biggest guy out there per se, but just tough to play against. Always has an active stick, just doing a lot of the little things defensively to make things chaotic for a team in the offensive zone. But they've both been really impressive, and they've both been really consistent as well. That's been another one of the impressive things is just kind of the maturity and the consistency that they've brought to the table in their first few months of pro hockey.
That's awesome, man. It's pretty cool that they're going through this experience together, their first full pro seasons, their roommates together, playing on the same pairing every now and then. I did want to ask Nolan Allen, I know just because of all the left-handed depth on defense in the Blackhawks organization. He was getting a lot of opportunities in Blackhawks camp on the right side, and when playing with Ethan Del Mastro, he would be on the right side as well. Has there been any like noticeable hindering of him on the right side, or has he looked comfortable there, or just basically like any other game, like you can't even really tell?
I want to say he did that with Seattle a little bit as well in the WHL. So, I did ask him about this earlier in the year, and the reason I can't remember exactly what he said is because he kind of brushed it off a little bit, because I don't really think it certainly it impacts him, right? But I don't think he feels like it hinders him from the kind of the brief chat I had with him about it earlier in the year. But I mean, from my perspective, like when those guys are on the ice, like they're starting to get more confident. You can tell, I think both of them in like joining, I don't want to say joining the rush, but joining the play offensively. Our assistant coach, Jerry Nightingale, does a great work with our D, teaching them how to, kind of instilling that confidence in them to be active in the play on offense. But this is not an IceHogs team that gives up a lot on the rush as it is. And so I think these guys, along with the rest of the D corps, is focused on being hard to play against in the defensive zone and keeping tabs on that area of the ice first.
Mike, you mentioned Colton Dach a moment ago, another season where he's kind of been banged up, but when he has been healthy, there's no denying how effective of a player he's been. What parts of his game have been the most standoutish to you, and how do you think he's also handling his first year of professional hockey?
Yeah, he's a big body. He goes right to the net. That's extremely noticeable about him. I mean, he had the hat trick back in November, hat trick and a shootout goal, by the way. So it's kind of a 4-goal-ish performance for him. But and one of the hallmarks of that night for him was him going right to the net. He had one goal go off his skate, I want to say, in that game. And that's not to take away from the goal. That I'm just trying to illustrate that he's going to the dirty areas. He's going where you need to go to score these. Some of these greasy goals, but he also right in front of the net is a great net front presence on the power play, and he made just an unbelievably silky play, kind of dragging the puck from his backhand to his forehand in front of the net and lifting it over the goaltender's shoulder. Even though he's a big body and he does go and play a hard game in front of the net, he still has the skill to finish around the net if he has the time to collect the puck or make a quick move. But he's been a ton of fun to watch, and he's been getting a great run with the top two lines for Rockford when he has been in the lineup. Unfortunately, he got sucker punched by a skater on Milwaukee a couple games back, and he's been in concussion protocol ever since then. But when he's on the ice, he makes the team better. There's no doubt.
Yeah, definitely hoping that Colton Dach will be able to get back on the ice soon and continue to pick up where he left off, because he was doing a lot of great things prior to that injury, and a really unfortunate and unbelievable kind of circumstance that happened in that game. But it's the game of hockey. Things happen. Just hope Colton can get back sometime soon. Mike, I also have to ask you about Drew Commesso. I know it's been a little bit of a struggle for him as of late, but again, another young guy who's playing a goaltender. They take a long time to develop. It's just a position where you need lots of experience and lots of reps, and you're going to go through ups and downs. But how do you think Drew Commesso has handled the ups and downs of a professional campaign for the first time? And what have you liked about his game as well this year?
Well, he's another really mature guy that the IceHogs have in the room. Got a good head on his shoulders and pretty relatable, for a goalie and stuff as well. Pretty down to earth, not lost in space like you see sometimes from that position. The IceHogs are pretty fortunate with their goalie room and him, Jackson Stauber, and Mitchell Weeks in that regard. But no, he's had a really good attitude, and he's had some adversity this year just with losses and goals that he probably would have wanted back, and that's not to take away from his great start to the season, because he had a really strong start, looking just solid and calm in net. And over the past month and a half, I think this has probably been one of the roughest stretches of his last couple of years in terms of playing hockey. I mean, you think of this guy coming out of the U.S. national team development program into Boston University, and he dominated at those levels, right? And he's on Team USA at World Championships and things like this, and this is kind of, a time where, there's some games where he's not getting a ton of run support and some things aren't maybe bouncing his way, so to speak. And so this is kind of a character building stretch for him, I want to say. But when he's dialed in, when he's on his game, he's really fun to watch because he had the youngest shutout ever by an IceHogs goalie earlier this year when he blanked Grand Rapids back in October. He picked up another good win against Grand Rapids just the other day. Looked really strong in net for the Hogs when GR was really pushing. But that's kind of what stands out is his calmness in net. I don't want to say like a Corey Crawford, but kind of maybe in that same sense where you've got a Jonathan Quick who's flopping all over the place like a fish, making these incredible athletic saves, and Crawford's more just kind of big, taking up the net, not giving you any place to shoot at. And he's never taken himself out of position. That's a little bit more like what Commesso is. Now, the difference is Drew Comesso's 6'2", right? At 6'2", about, I think we list him at 190 or something like that. And so he's not the biggest goalie, but he still plays pretty deep, and he's pretty like minimalist with his movements. And I'm not a goalie coach, right? But it is interesting to see a guy who's athletic as he is restrict his movements and be so efficient with the way that he saves pucks and with the way that he controls rebounds and the like. And I think that's probably one of the things you'll notice about a Drew Commesso game is that he has a great way of making a game boring. Like pucks stick to him like Velcro, and he'll throw his glove on everything he can get to get face-offs and control pucks that are kind of bouncing around the crease. And so he has a great knack for like slowing the game down in the defensive zone, which I think has helped him, these first few months.
And what's always interesting whenever I've like read scouts' opinions or analyst opinions on Drew Commesso, that's always what they've said is calm, cool, collected. Maybe nothing's going to jump out at you about his abilities. He's not diving across the crease, going and making a wicked glove save, but just kind of stays structured, stays in his own lane. And hey, as you mentioned, it's worked for him. He's played a lot of good hockey over these last couple of years and lots of different opportunities too. World Juniors, was on the United States team at the Olympics too. Like he's gotten a boatload of good experience, and it's awesome to hear that he's he got a good head on his shoulders and that he's not going to allow just a little bit of a tough stretch to kind of hinder all the great work that he's done these last few years. And I know there are a lot of Blackhawks fans out there that are excited along with myself for the future of Drew Commesso. I also wanted to ask you though about Jackson Stauber, because last season he got called up to the Blackhawks and he put up better numbers in the NHL than he did the AHL, and that's led to a lot of people always asking me what I think about Jackson Stauber. What have you kind of seen from Staubs in his second year with the IceHogs so far this season? I know it's been a little bit of a struggle for the goaltending group as a whole, but they've got some positive momentum going in the right direction. What do you like about Stauber's game and what he's done this year?
Well, let me get to Staubs here in a sec, but just kind of on the goaltending thing as a whole. It's interesting because almost every team in our division, at least, and most throughout the American Hockey League have a young goaltending prospect and then typically a veteran goaltender as well. And the IceHogs instead have 3 rookie goaltenders right now, if you include Mitchell Weeks. Now, Weeks and Stauber were both in Rockford last year, but they didn't play enough games to wipe away the rookie status. So that's kind of semantics. But there's 3 young goaltenders here in Rockford right now, Stauber, Commesso, and Weeks, who's on an AHL contract with us. But kind of getting into Jackson Stauber, one of the interesting stats from the first month of the year was that I want to say maybe through the first month and a half, Stauber saw about 6 to 8 shots more per game on average than Drew Commesso did. Now, part of that is due to Comesso's, again, ability to, like I said, freeze pucks in the defensive zone, things like that. Part of that's also because Stauber played in some games. He played in like 3 or 4 games earlier in the year where like they were like 3 or 4 of our worst games. And it had nothing to do with goaltending. It was just kind of a rough night for the Hogs all around. So he kind of got the raw end of that. Like case in point, our first weekend, which I've talked about a couple of times now in San Jose, we win 7-2 the first night. Comesso's in goal for that one. We lose 7-2 the next night. Stauber, gets peppered with like 49 shots and has a career high 42 saves, but they scored 7. So I think he did a great job kind of keeping a level head through the first month or so of the season when like his stats weren't super good. And he stepped up and really earned, his half of the net, I think, in, throughout November and December. And we had some win streaks and some point streaks that were much in part due to what Jackson Stauber did. And so I think, all of our goalies right now have developing to do. Matt Smith, our goaltending development coach here in Rockford, has an interesting task, a fun task for him, no doubt, with working with a bunch of young guys. And Smitty, he runs a goaltending school up in Ontario and has helped a lot of guys earn, NHL contracts and get to the next level of their game. And he's tasked with doing that again here with Commesso, Stauber, and Weeks. And right now it's goaltending by committee for the IceHogs. We've seen Mitchell Weeks play a lot, but the other prospects are obviously going to get their run as well. And Stauber's had some really good games. I'd say, the last month and a half, he's had more good games than bad ones. So there was a stretch where he didn't allow more than 3 goals. It was for 6 straight games or something like that. So he was giving us a chance to win every night.
Mike, just curious, has there been anything so far this season, any player or any part of the team, any aspect that's kind of caught you by surprise from what you were thinking going into the year?
Well, I think, and I kind of touched on this, going in, it felt like the Hogs were pretty loaded up front, and the D was where there were more question marks. And pretty soon, once we figured out that Allen and Del Mastro were going to be 2 legit staples, the story kind of flipped a little bit, and the defense for Rockford has been really sturdy. We added another guy recently, Austin Strand. We traded for him back in December from the Chicago Wolves. He's come over, done a great job, been a great addition. Wyatt Kaiser and Philip Roos are down with us right now. They've been really solid back there. So now the defense group, you look at it on paper, you feel pretty darn good about it. The forward group has been good. Again, it's been banged up at times. There have been a bunch of call-ups. Back at that a couple of weekends ago, we were in Texas. I think at the time the Blackhawks had 9 guys on injured reserve, not counting Luke Philpin, Samuel Savoie, and 8 of those guys were forwards. So we were getting kind of picked apart from that perspective. Depth scoring has been a bit hard to find here in Rockford. But I think that the happy surprise has been the D that's been so solid.
I almost completely forgot to ask you, how has Wyatt Kaiser been since he was reassigned to Rockford? Because, I want to say the expectations kind of got thrown out of whack a little bit for him when he had just such a good training camp. I don't know if anyone, except for Connor Bedard, stood out the way that he did in training camp. And it felt like the Blackhawks had no choice but to keep him on their opening night roster. But I always kind of envisioned that he was going to go the Alex Vlasic route, get a little bit of a stint coming out of college, but then go and spend a majority of the campaign down in Rockford. And he just had such a good camp that he opened things up with the Blackhawks. But I've always tried to tell my listeners and my viewers, don't be discouraged by Wyatt Kaiser going to Rockford. This is still fully in their plans. But I am curious as to how he's kind of looked. I know he's played in 12 games now since being reassigned. How have you thought that he's handled that and how he's played?
I think he's handled it really well. He's come down and been a pro since he first was sent down. And sometimes guys can get pouty or whatever, and he's been the opposite. He's been playing hard, been physical out there at times as well, even though that's not maybe the biggest part of his game. But he pops. You mentioned training camp. I was there in development camp or prospect camp, if you will, back in September, and he was wildly noticeable in that as one of the best players there. And he pops in the AHL as well. He doesn't have really the points to back it up. I think he just has maybe 1 assist right now with us through a handful of games. But he's playing with Philip Roos on a D pairing. And those guys have been excellent for Rockford. They've both been, again, going back to what I said earlier about Del Mastro and Allen, they've both been hard to play against. You think of these guys coming down and maybe Blackhawks fans want to see them get their points and stuff and be point per game guys or light up the American League in terms of scoring. But really, I think the messaging has just been, be hard to play against, because that's what this group defensively has been. Kaiser, another guy who does so many of the details right with his stick. His edge work and his skating is so noticeable as well. He may not have like the McDavid high-end speed, but it just feels like he can get to anywhere on the ice, get to any angle extremely easily. And it just doesn't feel like he gets caught out of position that much. I'd have to talk with Nighty a little bit more about, what he thinks of Kaiser's game up to this point. I haven't spoken with him specifically on Kaiser, but from up top, he pops again. Like his movement of the puck, the way he skates, the way he can wheel around and feels like he has control of the game as well. I think the offense will come for him, like the points and all that stuff. I think that will come in time. I don't think anybody's really worried about that much right now, as he kind of gets used to playing at the AHL, which is it's different than the NHL. Like guys come down and obviously the National Hockey League, it's harder to win in the NHL or harder to maybe score a goal in the NHL than the AHL. But you also have to think about this, like guys are passing it tape to tape in the NHL. When you go down to worse levels like the AHL or the ECHL or in junior, or in college, like it's a little different, right? Like not everybody is at that level. And so, obviously it's a great league with a ton of NHL caliber talent, but it does take some adjusting for guys coming down. And I think, Kaiser's been doing a great job through these first few weeks he's been with Rockford, and he seems to be as advertised down here.
Yeah, with his skating and his puck moving abilities, I think he's going to be just fine. It's just, to me, seems like a matter of him kind of figuring out a little bit more in the defensive zone and just kind of maturing in those areas a bit more. And what's kind of interesting is Ethan Del Mastro, who most Blackhawks fans and most people recognize as a defensive defenseman, is putting up really good numbers down in Rockford offensively. But I think that's on purpose because they're trying to get him into areas where he can work on those parts of his game. And for Wyatt Kaiser, who probably has a little bit more offensive prowess under his belt, I think they want him going down there to work on his defense a little bit more. And I mean, at least that's my opinion. And I think that's just the situations that they've led to. And hey, it worked out well for Alex Vlasic last year. And I think the hope is the same for a handful of young defensemen that are down in Rockford as well. Mike, I got one final question for you before I let you go. I know we're creeping up on 30 minutes here. Looking forward for the Rockford IceHogs, what do you think they kind of need to work on, or what do you think they need to be doing more of, or what are you looking for, or what do you think they need to do to have success and to make the Calder Cup playoffs for the third consecutive year?
I think one thing that we've seen the last couple of games is the Hogs starting to get some depth scoring. That's probably the area where I think, the slack needs to be picked up a little bit, I guess, if you want to say that. There's a lot of really young guys in that bottom six, and a lot of them have kind of matriculated their way up to the top six at times. Guys like Jalen Lipin, he's got 8 or 9 points on the year, 1 goal, but man, is he tough to play against. He's the smallest guy on the ice most nights, and he's out there PK, he's out there on faceoffs and things like that. And I know the coaching staff's been really impressed with the former 7th rounder. Ryder Rolston has 7 goals on the year. Really high motor guy, like high compete level. He's got a pretty good shot as well, as is the case with the 7 tucks. But sometimes that bottom 6, and it's a little bit the way that Rockford plays with the bottom 6, is trying to cycle the puck and get the top dogs out there. So there hasn't been as much scoring, but I think for this team to really catapult themselves into the top 2 of the division, they probably need some more scoring from those bottom two forward lines. The fourth line has been really outstanding for Rockford at times this year. Not really, they're mostly like AHL contracted guys down there, but it's a huge part of this team, and they haven't always found the back of the net, but they've consistently been, I think, one of the better lines for Rockford this year. Whether that's a Brandon Baddock or a Logan Nyhoff or a Cale Howarth or a Bryce Kindop on that line or whomever, if those guys can start getting a few more bounces, then I think this team is going to be really even harder to play against here. And the goaltending probably needs to find some solid footing. Mitchell Weeks has stepped in and played really well. He's 3-0 with the Hogs since coming up from the coast. But yeah, I think that depth scoring is probably number one.
Well, Mike, thank you very much for the time, man. I really appreciate you coming on the show, and hopefully the IceHogs will be playing some meaningful hockey later on in the year, and maybe we can have you back on for a chat, maybe before a playoff series or something like that.
Can't wait, Jack. Let's do it.
Absolutely, Mike. Thank you once again to everyone out there. Make sure to go and follow Mike on X, Twitter, whatever the crazy kids are calling it these days, at Mike_Folta. You get some great IceHogs news, updates, and insight. And we know the Chicago Blackhawks are not going to be playing very meaningful hockey down the stretch, but the Rockford IceHogs are going to be. And there's a lot of key players down there that all you Blackhawks fans should be keeping an eye on. So make sure to go and follow Mike, and make sure to be tuning into the Rockford IceHogs down the stretch of the season. Mike, thanks again. I'll let you go, but just wanted to say to everyone out there, thank you for following the show. Thank you for subscribing to the Locked On Blackhawks YouTube channel. Make sure to smash that like button, comment down below, and I'll see you next time on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast.